Welcome to this panel on AI and newsrooms. We have three excellent presentations today. One housekeeping note, we're going to do Q&A for all of the panelists at the end, so if you think of a good question, save it, write it down, and we'll have a lively discussion at the end. So with that, let's get started with our first presenter, Bahareh Heravi, with the presentation, Applying AI in Newsrooms, Lessons Learned from the Applied AI in Journalism Challenge.
So good morning. Thank you very much for being here, and thanks for the introduction. My name is Bahareh Heravi. I am at the Institute for People-Centered AI in University of Surrey, just outside London, UK. So I'm going to talk about applying AI in Newsroom. This is part of, or kind of the result of a work that I did with Open Society Foundation. It was an advising role that I was playing, so this is not an academic talk. This is more of an application talk that I'm having today. So I'm going to talk about what it is and how we work with the journalists who were part of this challenge. So Applied AI in Journalism Challenge, as I mentioned, was run by the Open Society Foundation. It was a competitive accelerator type program for small to medium-sized news organizations to use AI in their workflows. It was planned to be a learning by doing model, and the idea was that we should have low barriers to entry for people who want to participate in this challenge and who want to kind of take up the use of AI in their news organizations. Anyone could apply as long as their unit or their team was under 30 people, so no large organization or certain medium-sized organizations also could not be part of it. And also, we were encouraging applications outside of the UK, US, and Western Europe, or UK, North America, and Western Europe. Generally, the idea was that we were leaning more towards global South news organizations as opposed to the news organizations who already had a lot of resources or better opportunities, perhaps, or support to implement AI in their newsrooms. The objective for it was that it should be pragmatic, but at the same time transformational. And AIJC would sit kind of in between these two. So while we wanted them to be able to implement something within the time frame they had, it had to be somehow resulting into new workflows, new ways of doing things, new products, or new ways of doing journalism. It was opened in summer last year, the application procedure. For a pretty short time, it was open for application. We received 113 applications. They were assessed by a panel for selection of final 12 participants to take part in this challenge. Then we had couple of months or 3 months. So we started in June, July, and then November was the final. So they had 3 to 4 months to work with us, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the procedure that they worked with us. But then at the end of the day, there was 5 finalists. Then in October, they presented, all the 12 presented their work to the judges. 5 finalists were selected, and the finalists were taken to Thailand for a conference in Thailand or an event in Thailand where they presented their work there, and one winner was selected. So how it worked was the 12 participants who were selected would receive £5,000 each to be able to start something in their news organization. So if they were a really small news organization, £5,000 would be more substantial for them compared to the budget they already had. For larger ones, we didn't have many large ones, but some that were a bit larger, maybe 5,000 was not as significant. But it gave them the opportunity to subscribe to generative AI tools or to APIs, or some of them hired for a short time a freelance AI engineer to help them build something. So it was quite useful, and that was one of the what we were thinking: is money is money something that is going to help them, even though it is small? The winner got 20K, and they took it off, and they're doing something. Maybe they probably have already done something with it now. It's almost 1 year from the end of it, so we're going to do another study with them to see what happened with them in the past year after they took part in this challenge. So the way it worked was that they received a customized, concentrated AI training provided by Journalism AI at LSE in the UK remotely for them. So Journalism AI runs AI training for newsrooms, for small newsrooms around the world, and every now and then they have a call and news organizations can apply, but this one was specific only to this group of people, and it was run over a very short period of time, a couple of weeks to 3 weeks. And then it ended. As soon as it ended, they started working with two mentors, who were myself and David Caswell, who were working with the Open Society as advisors for this program. So the mentorship happened. We had weekly mentorship meetings with all the teams. They were optional, so they did not have to come to the meetings, but we were there it was almost like we had office hours with them that they could participate. Most of them participated in the mentorship meetings. We were helping them through project idealization, project development, project pitches that they had to do twice for their kind of mid assessment and the final assessment. And there was an ongoing brainstorming, coaching, mentoring, and so on. The teams who participated were from all over the world. So we had Rappler from Philippines, Puma Podcast, The Conversation Indonesia, Initium from China, Radio Zamaneh. Well, it is here in Iran. The audience is in Iran, but they are actually based in the Netherlands because they're exiled. We had Daraj and Rasif from Lebanon. We had Rubrika, who's an Ukrainian organization. We had Medusa, who are an exiled Russian news organization based in Latvia. Then we had Scrolla from South Africa, Agência Pública from Brazil, and Question Pública from Colombia. Oops, sorry. So these were the final 12 participants in the organization, and as you can see, it kind of goes through a very nice spread across the world, mostly from what people call the global south now. Or the majority world. So I'm going to show you some of the projects that we got to work on with the participants as examples. One of the interesting things as part of this project was that participants had a varying degree of AI expertise. Some of them had almost zero AI expertise, coming to us as editorial staff members of the organization, with no experience of even working with tools like ChatGPT, or very little experience working with ChatGPT. Some other ones already had a kind of a small development team. So Zamaneh Media was one of the interesting projects that we were working with. They got the special mention or something along those lines of the judges in the final. They were in the final 5. What they did was very simple. The two editorial members who took part in the challenge were those who didn't have, they had very, very little AI experience. So they worked on a newsletter. So it was simple, but very helpful. And they got to a point that they could produce newsletters from the content they have and from their archival content within a very short amount of time, test it, and put into a newsletter and sent to their audience. So what happened at the end was they managed to reduce a work that was 5 to 8 hours of manual work to produce each newsletter to 1 hour and 20 minutes. And this was within a matter of 2 months, around 2 months that they worked on it. They did not coding, they did not know coding, and they did not do coding. It was all working with ChatGPT, and they trained ChatGPT manually, and they kind of kept giving them its content, and they managed to link it up to their database and create a newsletter. So this was very, very simple project with very tangible outcome. And one of the things that they ended up thinking about was that now we can do topical newsletters, now we can do exclusive content, and they even thought about having paid content for their audiences or having very, very personalized, customized newsletters for different audiences because they had the information, they had the interesting, and they had the analytics, they had subscription profiles that people would pick the topics that they're interested in, but they were not able to produce that many newsletters, obviously, because of very limited resources that they had, and now they could. Another interesting project was Agência Pública in Brazil. They had a developer in their team, so they were a little bit more experienced in using AI. They created a kind of a voice. They created summarization of their content, but also a voice version of their content.
Presídios barram literatura para detentos por Leandro Aguiar, publicado por Agência Pública em 29 de fevereiro de...
But Mariana Simoes was or is a known voice in Brazil. So they came into an agreement with her and trained their system on her voice. So any piece of content that they had, the paid customers or their subscribed customers would also have the option to press the voice button and have it like a podcast. So in the past year, many news organizations have done these things, but bear in mind that this was happening in around just over a year ago. And they also had very good AI guidelines. Another interesting one was Rappler, who were the winners. They created a whole new website for young audiences, and they wanted to produce TikTok-like content for their young audiences on that new website. And they did it, and they were the winners. They were the winners of the challenge, and they got the 20K. And they also worked or experimented with these types of content, which was quite complicated, but they were getting somewhere with comic-like or animation-type content. And continuity was a bit of a challenge at that time, from frame to frame, but they were working on it, and maybe by now they have done that. They also had a summary for their audiences and guidelines. One other interesting one was the Question Publica. They actually got the special mention, not Zamane. They were more traditional. So they have been an investigative reporting firm or organization in Colombia, and they have been collecting loads and loads of information about the people that they are reporting on. And they apparently have quite a sarcastic voice known in Colombia. What they wanted to do is they wanted to go to their structured content, location, people, and so on, that like entity recognition type content that they had worked on before, and tagged loads of content, and they wanted to go in them and be able to create stories based on what they had in their kind of archival content in their own voice. So what they did, they came up with a workflow that would help them if they give them a topic of interest or something that they were working on. It could go and look into their existing tagged content and create a story. So the story at that time was a Twitter thread in their tone. So within a matter of from 3 hours to 15 minutes, they managed to create Twitter threads related to the story, connected to their tagged archival content. Kind of put it together. If it was writing about a person in Colombia, a politician, they were working most of the times about politician, it could go and bring some interesting points related to the story from their archives and put it in the Twitter thread. Some lesson learned from this challenge for us. Again, this is not an academic study, this is a practical talk. Opportunities to apply AI in news organizations, especially small news organizations that we were working with, span the entire news value chain. It is quite easy to adopt AI in news organizations, even if you don't have a lot of budget, even if you don't have a lot of resources. Barriers to entry is quite low. Small teams are in quite a unique position, in my opinion, to take up AI compared to 5 years ago, for example, that I worked with different news organizations. So it's much, much easier for the small news organizations to get on board. Coding is no longer needed as much. And when I'm saying not needed, I don't mean that because they can do it in ChatGPT. They can actually do a lot of interesting work without any coding, which was some of the participants that we had. They did no coding, and they still managed to do some very interesting work. Learning by doing is a very, very good model. It works very well in our experience in this challenge. Light touch, ongoing coaching and mentoring is a very powerful approach. So if, like, you have a team of journalists or some journalists, and you can have some advisory roles coming in, and every now and then just talk to them, a bit of like a chat event, light chats, it is very, very helpful. And we could see the participants who took part in the weekly meetings with us were actually the ones that ended up in the final, most of them. And some of the ones who did not do that didn't come as much forward as other ones who engaged. Accelerator type models are very, very effective and work well. Incentives are important, and as I mentioned, we only gave them 5K, but it made a difference. And at the end of the program, when we were talking to them about whether or not the final prize or the little money that they got in the beginning was important, they said that wasn't the main reason that we took part, but it made a difference for us, and we may not have been here if it wasn't for that. And for me, this proved to be an excellent model for AI literacy in news organizations, and specifically smaller news organizations, to kind of learn from. If you want to learn more about this program and this challenge, there is quite a comprehensive report that you can look into. You can either search the name or just scan the code there and go and read it. I'll give you a second if you want to scan that code. I can still see well, my phone's up there, so pause a bit. Yeah, and that's it for me. Thank you very much.
So, thanks for having me. I'm a huge fan of this conference. I will show you what my news organization in Switzerland does to implement at scale different AI tools to reach quality and productivity gains. My background is from journalism, and I switched into innovation over the past few years. And I had the privilege with Bahareh to co-organize last year's conference in Zurich. So this picture is from 2019 at the +J in Miami. And back then, we spoke about speech-to-text, about entity recognition, about automatic tagging, etc. And all this now is like boring AI. And it's not so long ago. And in this picture, you might recognize a few people. There is Krishna Bharat, who founded Google News. There is Jay Hamilton from Stanford University. And in the center, the guy who takes note, it is the owner of my company. He's very much into tech and innovation. But even though with AI, we had a quite slow start with GenAI. And this is another picture from Computation plus Journalism in New York, 2022, with Lydia Chilton, who showed us GPT-3. It was named Da Vinci. You had a playground. You didn't have ChatGPT then. And it was in June 22. And I was blown away. Because in 5 minutes, you literally could do on your smartphone what we've tried unsuccessfully to do within 6 months for example, a title generation or title proposal generation. So I saw the potential of GenAI in journalism on this day, and it was really mind-blowing to me. And only 1 year, more than 1 year later, in my company, we founded an AI lab with 8 people who are working 60% for the AI lab, and the rest, they are still in their original teams. This was very, very smart from our CEO to do so because it costed nothing, because they were in the payroll, on the payroll of their previous teams, one. And two, they didn't work. We didn't work in our bubble, in our lab. We still had the connections to the actual job we're doing. And then the team is also connected to other people. Here, it's a bit more than 8. And you have permanently people who are coming in for specific projects. And this is our mascot. The goal of our team is to train the staff, to educate people, to evaluate tools, and decide if we want to buy or build something, test the tools, and then implement it when it's useful. And after the implementation, it's not done. You have to continuously test, and things are evolving so fast in this field that one tool that might be the best one today could be outdated in 3 months with another disruption. Another very important point is, even though we had the owner of the company who was very interested in innovation and artificial intelligence, the rest of the top management wasn't understanding what it was all about. So we did an in-depth training of 2 full days for people who usually don't have 5 minutes free on their agenda, to really explain them and have them on board. And I think this helped very much to change the attitude of the responsibility chain on AI projects in the news organization. So my news organization is 3,500 people, the whole group, and the paid media organization is 1,300 people with 600 journalists. And not everyone is convinced or was convinced about the benefit we could get from using GenAI in the news organization. And then you have to communicate, and even with old school paper to reach people who wouldn't listen to you on their Slack or email channels. And this is not an expression for me, it's an expression from Ethan Mollick, professor at Wharton School. You have to find the hidden cyborgs within your organization, people who are using AI secretly and getting productivity gains, but they are not telling you because they are scared. What would be the direction of my supervisor if I tell that I use this or this? And you have to break the ice and tell them it's fine, you can use it, but you have to use it responsibly. You have to give them the tools to do so. We also organized a lot of mini hackathons with local journalists who are usually working on the ground, and from these moments we got a lot of ideas to build on. Providing the tools, of course, we hadn't the resource to provide a ChatGPT enterprise license to everyone. It's $60 per month per seat. It's a lot. So we've built a small interface with Slack, and they can interact with ChatGPT via Slack, and also in a secure way, because if you use the API, your data isn't used to train the machine, and we don't want OpenAI using our articles or our data to train their models. Another example is the voice-to-text software we use. There is Trint is the market leader. I think Otter.ai is another one, but we chose that one. Fairest price points, very good. And we've built AI toolbox where people could access to different AI applications that are relevant to their work. And I will show you some of those. But when something is major, we want to have it in the workflow, in the tools the journalists use the most. So in the CMS, for example, this is title suggestion generation. And often it's not used one-to-one, but it's used as an inspiration. And not by everyone. Some people are really good at finding good titles, but other journalists don't. They struggle with it, and they use this to find a different angle or different phrasing for their title. Face-to-face teaching or education, remote, self-study, every person is different, and you have to adapt to your audience. So we taught to more than 500 journalists within 9 months. We've built about 25 different AI tools accessible for everyone. And our goal is really to reach, you know this curve, to reach as fast as possible for different tasks, this plateau of productivity. And just for the sake of the example, I work in French and German, and so I did translate this graph in French. So Claude does that. So we are obviously not in this plateau of productivity for that, but in this disillusion, how do you call it? Trough. But after a few iterations, you can reach that. So it's some work, but you can reach that quite fast. And for the moment, we try to really work on the low-hanging fruits, the simple ideas that helps you to move further. But sometimes you realize that it's not a real low-hanging fruit. You are on the top of the tree. For example, we wanted to build a chatbot that works with vector search on our article database. But it sounds trivial, but when you do it for 500 articles, it's easy. When you want to do it for 5.5 million articles, it's much harder. So we finally got there, and I will show it to you. And we are close to do the moonshots after that. How much time do you have? 5 minutes. So I won't go through all the examples. And there is a workshop tomorrow, and maybe I can go deeper in some of those examples. And if the people who are working for news organizations are interested to join and also to participate to this conversation, that would be fantastic. We think that the whole value chain can benefit from AI, knowing that we want to have the human in the loop and the human in control and the human at the end of the loop, of course. Generate ideas. So we've built a prompt library for everyone, and you can see quite advanced prompts, like from notes. You can directly go to an article draft for simple breaking news stories, things like that. So the vector database, you can find articles also cross-lingual because it's language agnostic. So you can, in theory, search in Korean and get our content in French or German. And that was very difficult a few years ago. I've participated to a project in 2016-17, and we worked with taxonomies and dictionaries, and it was really, really hard. And now it does that. And because a vector, so we vectorized our database with the embedding system of Mistral, a French company, and the vectors are 1,052 dimensions, and this encapsulates the profound meaning or content of the article. It's quite crazy. So prepare and sort the data. The most obvious example is transcription. It saves a lot of time of everyone, and if we would block the access to the tool we provide to all journalists, they would be really, really mad about us. So data cleaning in data journalism with GenAI, you can really do things that have been very hard to do in the past. Teaser generation, so writing process. We already do teaser generation, bullet point generation. We are testing newsletters, timeline generation, and we are going towards augmented writing. So in your CMS, you can ask the system to provide you a context paragraph about the story you're currently writing based on the archive, or rewrite a paragraph based on the style of your newspaper, etc. You see here the bullet points generation is already in our CMS. Then article enrichment, evaluate the quality, syntax, diversity monitoring, user needs, and the ones in red are for the future, fact-checking, style guide, etc. SEO optimization. This is standard format conversion, newsletter generation, LinkedIn post generation. A lot of news organizations do that. You can also improve your distribution and performance analysis. So you now can, we have very complex audience data and in different data sets. And you can bring them together and in a natural language question that and get answers that would have required a data scientist to get it. So it's a POC, but it's working very well. I think Code Interpreter of OpenAI did major progress in the last month. And about the readers, we are conceiving also new products like stories that are automated, and we did in the past automated stories based on rule-based algorithm, but now you can polish the style with GenAI phrasing. And in some situation, it's safe enough to do it, like weather stories or traffic stories, it's fine. I wouldn't do it on all content. And then we just rolled out last week a bot where you can integrate our database. We have a few hundreds of reviews about TV series, and you can ask a question. For example, I love Better Call Saul. What do you recommend? And it gets on to our article database, picks the 10 most relevant ones, sends them as a context to the LLM, and the LLM answers based on our content. And I don't know if somebody has watched Lucky Hank. It's with the same actor, and it seems to be a very good recommendation. And it's quite amazing that you can do that. And we choose that because it's a safe example. We don't risk a shitstorm if we get an answer wrong. So I wouldn't do it in economic content or political content. So that's it. Thank you.
I'm Dhrumil Mehta. I teach at the Columbia Journalism School. I teach data journalism. Here is Aishwarya, who's one of our team members. She's a research assistant at the Tau Center. And Ken is not here today, but he's a computer science master's student at Columbia who works with us. And our project is Pollfinder.ai. We are helping newsrooms prototype AI-assisted data collection. before we get started, I want you to watch a video of, this is of people who are researchers in newsrooms collecting polling data. I used to work at 538 where we would aggregate polling data for election cycles. Every morning I'd have to wake up and enter all of the new polls that come out, crawl through the internet, try to find every new poll that came out that day, and enter it into the database. And we just want you to hear a little bit from those researchers about what it's like. Oh.
Newsrooms are often drinking from a fire hose of polling data. A few election cycles, newsrooms are often drinking from a fire hose of polling data. A few newsrooms have provided feeds of aggregate polling data to the whole industry, but behind those feeds are a bunch of tired journalists and researchers trying their darndest to keep up.
Polls are being released at all hours of the day and night and on weekends. As you can't just say, sorry readers, it's Friday at 5, we'll update this on Monday morning. The collection of polls is not where news organizations add value to polling aggregation. The sheer drudgery of finding the polls and entering the data is something that could easily be shared among organizations if there were a trusted source to do that. I'm glad someone who understands it is attacking it.
Okay, so this is the job that I had. How many people have worked as research assistants, like collecting data? Yeah, the like daily, right? So we had keywords like poll, survey, race, pollster. We were searching for them on Twitter, on Google, on and anywhere where we thought a pollster might publish something. These would all go into a Slack channel. Anything that we could scrape, we tried to scrape, but very few of these polls were released in the similar format. So it was really hard to sort of scrape them all. That all goes into a Slack channel where somebody like me would wake up very early, try to read everything in the Slack channel, quickly go, oh yeah, that's a poll, that's not a poll, that's the same Monmouth poll from yesterday, oh, this might be a new poll. It was just a lot of information to kind of read and sift through, especially as the election cycle comes in. Once we've identified a bunch of URLs that are polls, then there's sometimes just myself, sometimes with a small group of overworked journalists. We had to enter that into a spreadsheet, right? So every time we found a new poll, it's like, okay, what's the start date, end date, sample size, who was polled, what were the results, like these things we would manually enter into spreadsheets. All of that would go into a polling database, and then eventually that would power 538's elections forecast or all the other sort of data-driven politics news. And so what we're doing is using large language models to help make the lives of these people easier. We're not trying to automate the entire process away, but we want to make this a little bit easier to do. So this is our proposed process. You're searching for keywords, but instead of going into a Slack channel, which I directly drink from, it goes to an LLM, which tries to classify whether or not something is a poll. And then once it identifies that, yes, this is in fact a poll or a press release about a poll or something an article that might have a poll in it, we have a set of prompts that tries to extract the metadata we're looking for. So it goes, read this document, try to tell me what the start date, end date, sample size, name of the pollster, et cetera are. And then ideally, the human will look through everything, including this data, but also the things that were marked as not polls, but it's just a little bit easier to kind of sift through because it helps you prioritize where we think new polls are. That goes into a polling database, and then out comes some news. So we're still, I don't think we're in a place where we can really use it for the 2024 cycle just yet, but we're sort of have been experimenting with it, and this is a wonderful page that Aishwarya made that can show you what some of this process looks like. So here's Ohio and Senate and poll and Brown and Moreno. So that's what we're searching on Google Search, Google Alerts, et cetera. And you can see this is all the stuff that came out of it. So there are a bunch of articles that match that query. This one it seems to think is a poll, so it tries to extract this basic information. This will not go straight to the web, like our database, right? Some human will look at this and go, oh yeah, there might be a poll here. And you'll notice that, like, as we go through these, for example, this one, where'd it go? This one, for example, will be something that looks like this. It might be like an article about a poll, but somewhere in there, ideally, they link to the poll. The LLM tries to find it, and then it finds that link. It's like, oh yeah, this is probably the poll they were referring to, right? And so the idea is to just help the human get to this really quickly. Okay, so let me keep going here. Okay, so this was our proposed process. We have two sort of automated parts, the classifier and then the data extractor. But as we were building this, we realized that this is actually not just a polls problem. One of our students was working on a master's thesis where she was looking at the Washington Post's fatal force tracker, which tracks every police officer shooting a civilian in the US. I think Julia mentioned that in the keynote speech. And we talked to their research assistants, and they do something pretty similar. They have other places they search as well, like police records and whatnot. But they've got some research assistant who searches for words like police, shooting, civilian, et cetera. They've got kind of a checklist of things that they do every day. That goes into a kind of a channel. A lot of the stuff that matches those searches are either things that, you know, it'll have the word police and shooting in it, but like there was a shooting that an officer responded to, which they're not interested in. They're interested only the ones where the officer did the shooting, right? Or it's an update on an old case, or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Then once you identify that, yes, this might actually be an article about a police shooting, you want to know who is the officer, who is the victim, when did it happen, where did it happen, is this one that we've already got? So there's kind of that extraction process, leads to structured data and output. We're not working with the post yet, but we identified that problem as being of the same shape as our problem. And then we realized actually a lot of newsrooms have these kinds of data collection pipelines. And so instead of Pollfinder, we're kind of ThingFinder now. Our hope is that we can identify newsrooms who have similarly shaped problems who want to come and experiment with us. And you'll join us in sort of trying to explore the utility of this pipeline with sort of whatever keywords you want and whatever kind of shape of data you're looking to collect at the end of the day. So this is kind of the more generalized process. When we say a Pollfinder shaped problem, I mean a keyword search followed by classification, data extraction, and then structured data. So we started out as Pollfinder.ai, now we're ThingFinder.ai, and in fact, we don't want to find the thing, we just want to help you find the thing, so we're ThingFinderHelper.ai. What we want to do is operate as a self-sustaining research lab out of Columbia University. So the idea here is we want to identify about 4 or 5 news organizations every semester who have a similarly shaped problem, and we'd like to appoint a set of AI and journalism student fellows who will use our pipeline to help to work with your newsroom and kind of start to tailor the prompts to fit the kind of thing that you're trying to extract or identify. And then at the end, we either hope to, if it's a big newsroom that has sort of an engineering team, we hope to be able to hand off the prototype to them. Otherwise, we can talk about ways in which we can support you in sort of continuing to keep the pipeline alive. So hopefully we produce. Our objectives are to experiment with AI pipelines. Really what we want to do is start to define the editorial best practices, right? Like what does it look like to use something like this for data collection? How do you not miss anything? How do you deal with errors that come out? So we really want to identify the best editorial practices around something like this and build a community of data editors who are using AI pipelines for data collection. So we have a couple of things that we hope will come out of this. One is our infrastructure, which we hope that other folks can use as well. Ideally, we're producing 4 to 5 student fellows who kind of have some experience with prompt engineering and then go out into the newsrooms and try to, and editorial processes around this, and then go out into newsrooms and sort of try to apply those things there, having our guidance and sort of the guardrails that we have at the university as a starting point. Working prompts, we think that some of the prompts that we're building could be adapted to other kinds of problems, so we'll have a sort of bank of working prompts. And I think risk tolerance. This is something I actually wanted to do in like 2020, but my editor was like, are you insane? You want to walk away during a busy election cycle for 6 months and build something that may or may not work? Absolutely not, right? And I think newsrooms are kind of strapped, and it's hard to take on high-risk projects, and so we want to create an environment where, like, if you're willing to dedicate a little bit of time to work with our student fellows, and maybe like we can talk about a payment structure or whatever, like we want to keep it pretty easy to get into and just give you as a newsroom a little bit of the high-risk tolerance that we have as a university as well. So we currently have a $40,000 Magic Grant from the Brown Institute at Columbia University that got us started. We've also partnered with Columbia Journalism Investigations, where we're working on our first non-polling use case, identifying structured data of prisoner exonerations in New York State. They're working on a piece around that, and we're using our pipeline to help them sort of identify these cases and extract structured information out of these really long legal documents. And what we're looking for is newsrooms who are collecting data using a similar process. So if you've got some kind of problem where you've got a keyword search, then some kind of manual filtration, data extraction, and producing structured data. At the Tau Center, where I also work, we're collecting newsroom AI policies. So we have like the word AI, policy, news, and then most of the stuff that matches that is just like things about AI or AI policy. But what we really want is like X newsroom is now allowing AI for images or things like that, right? And so that's another example of a Pollfinder-shaped problem. We've got some keywords at the beginning, some kind of specific structured thing at the end that we're kind of trying to identify. And so we're looking for people who want to partner with us who have these shaped problems of data collection. And I will add, we think we can do it fairly cost efficiently, but we only have enough money to really get us started. So we're also looking for a little bit of funding. If you happen to be the kind of person that knows how to find money, we could use that help too, just to get ourselves off the ground. So thanks very much. We're thingfinderhelper.ai.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. Titus, I have a question for you. I'm very curious if when you start doing these trainings in your newsroom, there was any opportunity, like the newsroom stopped. Like, how do you make people stop and think about AI having ideas or because I think I don't know how many people work in newsrooms here, but there's a lot of excitement. But then when it's like stopping to think about it and how can you implement it? And connected to that question is, do you see that you mentioned that your organization at the top is very interested in implementing technology. Do you see that like functioning in the small organizations, nonprofits that have less resources than an organization like yours? It's very exciting, the whole process.
So you can't stop a newsroom. So they have very, very hard deadlines, but you can take some people out, and the AI lab is also composed by with journalists, so who know what's really to work in this news cycle, and they know the constraints. And doing mini hackathons on half a day or a day with a smaller group is one way to do it. And you can't force 600 people the very same day, take 3 hours to listen to a presentation. This is ridiculous. You have to offer multiple formats, shorter, longer ones, and find your allies, the early adopters, and also be open to the critique. And test your tools you're rolling out as early as possible, because sometimes you build a big thing, and I know about that, and nobody uses it because it's too complex.
Hi, sorry if this is my name is Heini Schittler, the ex-Boston Innovation. And I was so amazed to hear the Dhrumil AI lab story, because you highlighted some very important things, I believe. First of all, that the owner was very involved in innovation, the communication, the education. I see it always as a problem that how the innovation team and the journalists, they just don't find the same language. Mm-hmm. So what was the challenge that you guys had to face with?
The challenge is always the same for every project in journalism. It's not necessarily about innovation in a news organization, because you have the news cycle, and basically your stakeholders have every day something more urgent, more important to do. So you have to adapt constantly, and this is the biggest challenge. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. So I have my question for Titus and Bahareh. So Zilia Benet from the Russian media, and I'm just interested in. So I'm thankful for the work that you're doing for teaching the journalist team to work with AI. So I'm dealing with the journalists from Russia, from Belarus. Highly under-resourced in this situation of the exile and political pressure. And so I wanted to ask you just what the biggest obstacle that you find when trying to teach AI tools to these types of journalistic teams. So how do you overcome that wall? If you can tell about some failures when it was impossible to make these teams use these AI tools.
I can start. Thanks for the question. I mean, for me, one of the main things, if you're talking about inside the news organization, is resources and the time to get the journalists to commit. And what Titus already mentioned about how to get the management on board is a good thing. But also, one of the things that I've worked with journalism students over the years and professional journalists, I have found them to be quite scared of the technical aspects of AI and computational tools or data journalism when I was working with them on data journalism. And one of the ways that I've managed to work with them was to try to make it as simple as possible for them. Luckily, with tools like ChatGPT or different generative AI tools, it has become so easy for them to engage. And my suggestion is this learning by doing model that I was talking about earlier, and having some little levels of mentorship, if you can provide them. That would be very, very helpful with them, because people can sit there together with a mentor. It could be only half an hour per 2 weeks or something like that, and just chat with them and tell them about what they're afraid of, what are their potential challenges that they're having, even with the management or within the organization, and just have a little bit of chat, and then try to define some small projects to achieve something over time. And then little by little, my experience has been that journalists can achieve big things when they do small projects. I'm also working with the smaller news organizations like the BBC at the moment, that I'm a fellow, half of my time is at the BBC. Then that's a different set of challenges, because you're talking about a fast-paced, large news organization, and getting the time of the journalist is difficult. One of the things that I'm trying to do within that context is every training or every workshop scenario that we have, or every study scenarios, because I'm also studying them, make sure that I'm giving them back something very tangible for them to go outside of that workshop or outside of that session, so they will feel they've achieved something immediately as they leave that room or that session.
Can you just tiny examples of what are these things that you give to them?
It's normally information, or for example, we can have a workshop about, okay, let's say then discuss the challenges that you're having with respect to the use of AI, or I'm working with them on AI literacy. We could have a workshop, different groups can come together at the end and identify a set of challenges or a set of needs that they have. Then again, somebody from the organization can come in, look at those and say, okay, now I'm going to spend half an hour to explain to you what we have in place, or what resources we have, or what training potentials we have here for you, or what tools there are there that you could have already used, or we will help you, or we will work on development of these tools so you can actually use them. So it's kind of an immediate feedback loop, or it could even be just signposting, because in large news organizations sometimes there's so much resources out there that the journalists don't know they're out there, or there could be guidelines and regulations there that the journalists may not be fully aware of. So that kind of immediate feedback loop and signposting, I think is quite useful.
All right, we are at time. Thank you all so much for your questions. Let's keep the conversation going during the break.